Hola, amiga, and welcome back to the Latina Leadership Podcast, the podcast for Latinas by Latinas, where every week we have real conversations about the issues and topics that matter most to our community. Topics like education, health and wellness, entrepreneurship, pay equity, and so much more. Get comfortable. We're bringing you another inspiring episode starting right now. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Latina Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Susie Barrera, and today we have the honor of speaking with Senator Leticia Van Putte. Thank you, Senator, for taking time out of your busy day to speak with us.
It's my pleasure to be with you.
So, there are some questions that I have for you. I've been really eager to speak with you given your political history, your education, and also your mom's legacy that she left on
Yeah.
San Antonio and mariachi music. So, your political career spans over 2 decades, right? I was wondering what motivated you to step into the world of public service, and how did your upbringing shape your approach to leadership?
Um, Thank you very much. It's an honor to be on the podcast with you. My upbringing was here in West Side San Antonio, but with parents who were college educated. Um, I am, I know people call themselves Chicanas or Latinas or Mexican American. I'm Tejana. My family's been here 300 plus years. So my family was here when this land was indigenous.
Mm.
And they first came, and it was Spain, and we were here. And then it was France, and we were here. And we were Mexico, and it was here. And then we were the Republic of Texas, and then we were the United States, and then the Confederacy, and back to the United States. So the joke in our family is we've been in the same area,
Mhm.
but the damn government kept changing. My mom, her dad, total Tejano también, but with both abuelitas born in Mexico. Um, so I'm not the first generation college graduate. My parents are, and in fact, my grandfather was a pharmacist. So we've had that legacy of education as knowledge and power and the ability to improve your family and in your community. My parents were very politically involved. I think it was coming out of the Korean War and not being able to purchase a house in
Mm.
certain parts of San Antonio because it was restricted then to Mexicanos and blacks and Jewish people. Um, Even though my father would use the same veteran VA loan that the guys who were with him in the Korean War used, but we were excluded. Those families were
Wow.
excluded. Um, my my padrino is Joe Bernal, so former state senator. So I was very little when my parents became active in the empowerment of Latinos and election of Latinos. Um, and they were always in the background, as were we. We were taught, you help the candidates that you want to help that represent your community best, and you vote. You absolutely vote.
Mhm.
So I didn't know any better, right? It's the same question that my parents always had for me: is where do you want to go to college? Where are you thinking? It wasn't can I go, or maybe you should think about it. It was always you're going. Where would you like to go? So if you have that generation after generation that has that culture of involvement, whether it be in upward mobility or voting or political activism. So I was blessed with that. And then, I was just involved in the community. I was active in my professional organization. I'm a pharmacist, and
Mhm.
I was president of our local pharmacy association and went to the Capitol to testify for things like maybe we ought to give prenatal vitamins on the Medicaid formulary to moms. That might be helpful. Um, and also for women and women equity, belong to the Mexican American Business and Professional Women's Group, and part of the inaugural forming committee for Espadas Unidas, who celebrated its 40th anniversary. So I was surrounded by amazing people who were just trying to make it a little bit better. So political involvement is no different from community involvement,
Mm.
except it requires you to engage in a different arena and put your name on a ballot. And that's what happened. And it's kind of anger that motivated me, given that there were just about a dozen women in the Texas legislature out of the 150 when I first ran,
Oh, wow.
and certainly not enough Latinos. And um, so it was a very different place. And I was very unusual. I was a business owner. I owned my own pharmacies and medical clinics. I had 6 children under the age of 10. And, uh, you know, I didn't fit that mold of maybe a lawyer, um, and certainly not a male. So it was a very different perspective, but one that I think was greatly needed. I stayed in the House for 5 terms and then ran for the Senate and stayed there another 16 years. Very privileged to work with so many people for things in our community, and will always be a reward.
Wow, that is quite an accomplishment. I love how you brought in how you're not just first generation. Y'all kept it going in your family, in the family tradition. It really became a staple in your family to make sure that y'all were educated. I'm a first gen Latina college graduate. I got my
Yes.
associate's degree last in the spring. And so it is something that I want to continue to push forth for my children as well. Your motherhood has been very, very pivotal, and I know that you must have prioritized it a lot and still managed to be able to accomplish so
Well,
much.
well, I can tell you there were years that I probably was sleep deprived,
Mhm.
but it forces you to be highly organized, and it forces your children. It forced my children to be highly responsible. Um, but it is easy in that, I was cooking since the time I was 12. So for me, even before I went to the legislature, on Sunday afternoons I was cooking 4 or 5 meals because I didn't know from the pharmacy if I was going to get home at 7:30,
Mhm.
um, because of my business. And I wanted my family, to be fed, and they could be really good about, mixing a salad or doing stuff. So I did a lot of cooking, and then made sure that that was it. There was always ollas de frijoles, and
Yes.
I froze them, right? So,
Mm.
my house will fall apart if there's not an olla of frijoles or maybe some fresh salsa. My husband doesn't think that we can function without it. But it's also making your children a part of what you're doing.
Mm.
So when I would go to a community event, I would bring my children. It may have not been, I was like, what? But if it's a school festival or a church festival or a community meeting, I'd have my children there and they would have their coloring books and have stuff. And I think that it also serves as a purpose for them to see that you're in a family, but it's about your community. And they went to the legislature with me quite often, and I had a spouse that was more than supportive. Pete was very, very encouraging. So a daunting task, but it also, we had things like, you might find this a little odd, but in the legislature, you have timelines that are set for posting requirements for meetings so that the public has ample opportunity to have input. Or there was going to be a hearing on a bill. So we call them 24-hour and 48-hour posting requirements.
Oh, wow.
I adapted that to my household. I didn't have time to be going through 6 backpacks. So it's their responsibility to get out the permission slip for the school trip, or I need a juice can and 3 cotton balls and some, you know, popsicle sticks for an art project. It's their responsibility to get that out. My responsibility to kind of look at that and to make sure that, papers were signed and stuff. But it made them be more responsible, I think. And then the accountability portion. I think what happens to a lot of systems and families and institutions, you have a code of conduct or you have procedural operational protocols, and there are consequences for not following that. And a lot of times, we ease up. Okay, if and with my kids, if you act up, we're coming home. We're not going to SeaWorld. well, you need to follow through on it.
Yeah.
And one vivid memory that I remember with my kids is they were just acting up and acting up. I was so excited we were going to go to SeaWorld, and the boys were acting up. And my husband turned around and said, "Next time, we're in the parking lot of SeaWorld. Next time anybody acts up, we're going home." I'm just getting the baby into the little dolphin stroller, and my husband said, "Let's go.
Oh,
They're acting up." $250 worth of tickets we hadn't even gone through,
oh, wow.
but we made good on our consequences. You act up. So what happened is anytime else we said, "Hey, y'all need to settle down or we're going home." Se acabó, man. That behavior stopped. Well, in systems and in government and in communities, if there are certain actions and things that you need to do and you fall short, there needs to be accountability. There needs
Mm.
to be accountability for public officials, for organizations, for definitely the business community, our school systems. And I kind of grew up with that and then instilled that in my kids, but it's a better outcome very much because you've probably encountered people that have slided their way and never learned that responsibility. So, along with a great education, it's that responsibility that it's about the greater good and all of us rather than about me getting total personal satisfaction of what I want.
That's great advice. It is hard to manage a couple of hats when you're a mom, a wife, you want to
Yes.
start a business. So I'm glad that you're able to share that tidbit of wisdom with us so that we can also move forward. I know it's beneficial for me. So thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to touch on your mother's legacy.
Oh,
Isabel A. Ortiz, right? Affectionately known as the Mother of Mariachi.
that's
Um,
right. She is.
Yes. How did her role as a cultural figure and trailblazer influence your understanding of community and leadership?
Her mother was born in Guadalajara and fled the revolution along with their family. And you're from Guadalajara. Pues there's two things we can do really well, and that's mariachi y tequila. And my family did very well on both of those fronts. So our family gatherings were always full of music. And understand when my great grandmother, when she wore her china poblana sequined, skirt, it wasn't a costume.
Mm,
It's not a costume. When Huelita wore that, it was a family evening occasion or una quinceañera. She wore that china poblana. That's an evening outfit. That's for celebrations. And Huelo with his you know his tie and it was how they dressed and how they acted. So it wasn't like a costume for us or something. We grew up with a lot of music in our home. And
mm.
my mom was a choir teacher, and she was teaching at a time when it was against the rules of the school districts to speak Spanish. And she was taken before the school board
Wow.
because she had Los Tejanitos at Barkley Elementary, and they were performing folklorico and they were singing. And I remember being very young and going up to the school board meeting with my dad. And I said, "What's going to happen?" And my dad said, "Oh, your mom's probably going to be fired from her job."
Oh, no.
But she had a principal that backed her up and other teachers. And when she went before the board, she had the Tejanitos there. And she said, "The board has instructed for the arts part, the secondary parts, the arts and physical, to work in conjunction and collaboration with your main core curriculum. I'm working with our geography fourth and fifth grader teachers. So when they do world history and stuff, we are combining that." So it was her friend, Miss Murray. And she said when they were studying Italy, the children would sing, and she had her choir there and they sang in Italian. And when
Oh,
we did they sang in German. And she said, "So I am not purposefully flaunting the board's policy. I am actually complying with it by having our students sing in the languages of the countries that they are learning about in their fourth and fifth grade classrooms." Well, they couldn't fire her, right? They couldn't
yes,
fire
you're
her.
following the rules.
So mother always found a way, and her students and her team, but she loved it because it empowered. the school to bring in parents and grandparents that would have a cultural connection
Mhm.
to their children and the school, right? So thanks to a lawsuit, and we need to thank those pioneer organizations like MALDEF and LULAC. When
Mhm.
we got single member districts for San Antonio Independent School District, it reflected a change in board membership. New superintendent, Dr. Victor Rodriguez, new board president, Dr. William Elizondo, who overturned that you can't speak English in our schools to celebrate and want more of the mariachi music, of singing in our culture to show pride. But one thing, so my mother became, her dream was to have mariachi, a UIL event, just like orchestra or band. And it's happened. It took 50 years, but now there's over 3,500 mariachi programs in different school districts across the country, and she is known for that. She originally wrote the music, had the first festivals, but it was about bringing that pride to our students and to their parents. But she was cultural arts for the school district. At the same time, and very little known fact, she got with her friends who happened to be Black school teachers and started the reggae and the drums and the rhythm section at Sam Houston High School to have more of an Afrocentric type of cultural and musical art, because she felt all children needed to be connected very deeply to their roots.
That's so profound. And you're right. It has actually made such a difference in the way that children are able to take pride in their own
Yes,
ethnicity. So, oh my gosh, what an
yes.
imprint. What an imprint. So, being a Tejana leader in Texas politics, that had to have been hard. What were some of the challenges you faced breaking barriers and how did you overcome them? I'm so interested to hear this.
Well, I wasn't the first. I've got to say thank you to my mentors, dear friend, Senator Judy Zaffarini, the first Latina in the Texas Senate, and to Irma Rangel from Kingsville, a great friend and mentor. Um, we, uh, like all women in any field, you need to be twice as prepared. And you need to make sure that your actions are always based on what the protocol is and treat people with respect. And when those moments come, at least for me, where I felt that the activity wasn't professional or I felt diminished, I used humor as a great tool to
Mhm.
disarm those who would diminish and try to define who I was or what I was trying to accomplish. And then I never burned bridges. It didn't matter what folks said about me or anything. I wasn't defined by the title of representative or senator. The only people that can rip my heart is my own family, right? And as long as they love and respect me, I know that I would need to do what's right for my constituents and the conscience and to keep a vibrant representative democracy. So I fought for voting rights, for bilingual education and education for first time um, folks in the higher ed arena. I also fought for health and safety and human trafficking and veterans and their families. So there are so many opportunities to get involved and to do the work. And most of those ideas didn't come from me. They came from constituents and people coming to our office and engaging. And I'm so grateful for the people that I represented. It wasn't me. I might have been there, but it was with their help and a lot of group work. And then to make sure that, you know, y- you choose your battles, right?
Mhm.
Choose your battles. You're not going to win on everything, and it's more like a journey, not a sprint.
You bring up a very poignant point when you were talking about the things that you have done. So I did my research when I knew that I wanted to interview you. And one of the things that I came across was, and I'm sorry if this, makes you uncomfortable or it stirs up some emotion. Um, I saw that during your father's passing, you
Mhm.
went and you supported, a bill for women's health, while,
Yeah.
Wendy Davis was doing a filibuster, and I wanted
Mm.
to personally thank you for
Oh,
standing up for, women's rights at that moment while you were grieving and while you were, going through the passing of your father and experiencing that
well,
family.
thank you. Thank you. It actually was because of him.
Mm,
You see, my dad, since I was a little girl, would introduce me, right? This is Leticia, my daughter. And the first say, oh, what a pretty little girl. And he would say, and she's the smartest in her class. So when he'd introduce me, esta es mi hija Leticia. Ay, qué bonita la muchachita. And he would say, ella es la más inteligente de toda su clase. It made an impression on me because in a era that I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, every girl wanted to have that Barbie figure. I was taught that it was about my brain and my heart, and that it was school was important. And when, I didn't look like a Barbie, I had big thighs. My dad became a track coach and encouraged me to do broad jump and relay. It was about strength
mm,
and never about how you looked, but how you did in school and what you did. And he did that from my very early age. And so at his funeral that night, we had gathered, and you know how you put a collage of pictures and things, and there was a picture of my dad when we were celebrating in the Senate, where I was pro tem and governor for the day, and I
mhm,
was acknowledging him as he was a Korean War veteran and all the veterans in the office, and he's standing and clapping. That picture came up, and I realized that my dad was so empowering at a time when that wasn't what you were teaching little girls, that I felt like I need to be there. I turned to my chief of staff, Gilbert Loredo, when he told me that they had called the second point of order on Senator Davis. And I said, I need to go. And I said, but I won't make it. And knowing me, he says, I have DPS right outside ready to take you.
wow.
Um, and it was the other women there. But when I said those words in the filibuster about, at what point was a female senator raise her hand or her voice to be recognized in the room over a male colleague, I said it very calmly. That's me enraged.
Mm,
And I was so angry, but my anger is very controlled. And it set off the people who were there. Because you have to realize at that time, it wasn't just about reproductive rights. The governor had just vetoed the Lilly Ledbetter bill, which was
mhm,
about pay equity and just being compared. They had ripped hundreds of millions of dollars from the women's health programs. They had denied a bill strengthening protective orders for domestic violence. So as women, we felt like, and then it was not just Democratic women, it was women in general, all women, that legislative session had been a slap in the face for all of us in
mm,
so many areas. And when that crowd let loose and they found their voice, they ended the filibuster, not us. And women found their voice that day. And then we saw they marched, right? They found their feet, they marched, and then they voted, and then they started running for office.
mm.
So I think about that day in June 2014, over 10 years ago. It was a catalyst. It was a moment in time for our state, for women to realize not only are we here, we're at the table, but you can't be dismissive of us even when we're here. And that set a whole different chain. At the time, very naively, we thought, how bad can it get?
Yeah.
Well, now we know. So I hope that women are empowered to actually go vote.
I'm so glad you encouraged that because that is something that is very uh, detrimental to women's just autonomy, bodily autonomy right now in our modern day. So you've
Yes.
been an advocate for healthcare and veterans issues, right?
Yeah.
You passed the oh, I'm trying to remember.
The
Is it
Hazelwood. It's the
yes,
Hazelwood Act, college credit for heroes. So
yes.
so many great things that I worked with our veteran community. Yeah.
Yes. What inspired you to make those issues so important to you?
every day that I walked onto that House floor or Senate floor, I looked in that grand chamber and I thought, how blessed I am just to be here, but that we have the privilege in this representative democracy to speak out, to present bills, to have our voice here, and realizing that that's come with the price. And so that the men and the women who have donned that uniform,
Mm.
generation after generation, we owe a great deal to. Uh, just a few weeks ago, my family, my husband's family is his grandmother's from Saint-Malo, from the Brittany coast of France, and they went there and they went to Normandy Beach
Oh,
and
wow.
to Utah Beach, and it was significant in that the French people who were there said, had the Americans not been there on D-Day, they would not be speaking French, they'd be speaking German.
Mm.
And it hit us so hard that that generation has paid for the freedom for me to be and yell at the top of my lungs in that chamber. And I felt it, since it's less than 1% now of the American populace that has folks in the military. We hope we never have to use them.
Mhm.
But, you know, my grandparents, my dad grew up in an era where we were um, at war. And we owe it to them. We owe it to them. We ask them to defend us when we need, and they do so willingly.
Mhm.
And so I felt like I had the best portfolio in the state, in that I chaired that Veteran Affairs and Military Installations um, committee. And all I would wanted to do was to make Texas the best place for active duty military and their families, and for our veterans and their families. Um, and I was very, very emotional when those things occurred, because I mean, we live in freedom, but there's a price that's been paid.
Yes, like they say, freedom is not free. It
No,
is not free.
no.
Um, I wanted to ask you how you found your voice. It seems like your dad instilled a lot of self-respect, integrity. Your mom, dignity
Oh,
and
it was
just
my mom. It was my
yeah.
mom. And it was a double-edged sword. Mom always told my sisters and I that she would be so proud, because we would be the first generation of women who would not be defined by who our fathers are or who our
Mhm.
husbands are. And she said it would be just so joyous. But she also cautioned that it's not anybody else's fault except our own. So she said, my generation, we had an excuse. Ay, mi papá no me deja. Ay, mi esposo no le gusta, right? Oh, my dad doesn't like that. My husband's not going to let me. She says, you don't have any of that. She said, so if you don't make what you want of yourself and your career and be a person of significance and of value, she said, you failed. It's on you. You have every opportunity, and you can't blame anybody except yourself. So you fail, mija, it's on you. Very tough.
Mhm.
Very tough with the expectations of, there is no whining, oh, you can't blame anything. You can't blame. No, there are opportunities there. You need to seek them, and you need to work at them, and have faith in yourself, have faith in God, and you need to do it, because at the end of the day, it's you.
Wow, that that
That was
hit
very
to my
tough,
core. It really did.
right?
Yes, and you utilized that in the male-dominated field that you were
Yeah,
in.
just, hey,
What lessons did you learn while going through that helped you assert your leadership style and influence in Texas legislature, sorry.
well, I worked as a pharmacist, of course, and owned my own pharmacies. At the time, a very male dominated field with physicians. And, a lot of times they have, as they should, a great ego. So I learned how to work with people and gently correct them without totally emasculating them. And it's not about male versus female, it's about how to work in a team, right?
Mm,
How to be respectful of one another. And then, as a mother of six, I excelled at adolescent mediation, which sometimes comes in real handy in the legislature, when feelings get hurt and stuff.
mm,
And you have to understand they're just people. But probably my most successful way is that I call it my 3 A's. Whenever I approach someone, number one, I acknowledge their feelings. The nice thing about just acknowledging feelings is you don't even have to agree with them. You just have to acknowledge them. And I would go up to a colleague, and say, "Hey, I know you might be confused about this, or you might be upset." And they tell, "Oh no, I'm really angry." What day? And I said, "I know you must be feeling very angry. I can understand that. Or I know that you're very proud of this." So whatever, you acknowledge their feeling. And then I would articulate the greater good.
mm,
Whatever it is that I was promoting, what I needed, make your case, right? Um, you articulate the greater good. And then I'd make the ask. Can I count on you to support me when I bring this bill to the fore? Can I ask you to help me if you see somebody that's, can I ask for your support? Can you join in this committee? Will you help organize this? So it could be a
mm,
legislator, it could be a community person and stuff. But what I realized is that people who are pretty successful, they come and they make their pitch, they can articulate the greater good very well. And and sometimes, that's all they do, but they don't make the ask.
mm,
If you leave a conversation or a film without asking somebody that you need their help on a project or on something, then you've kind of wasted that opportunity, right? But what I found is that people who can gently encourage people to do the things that they're uncomfortable to do, or to move in a direction that they really don't want to, but that it's in the best interest. I've I've found that if you acknowledge just their humanity and their feelings,
mm,
then it starts the conversation in a totally different paradigm. Then it's about a personal relationship. I care about you and I need your help. Will you do this? So I think part of my success was understanding, acknowledge feelings, articulate your greater good, then make the ask.
I totally agree with you that validating somebody and what they're going through, showing empathy and compassion
Yeah.
and understanding, it does go a long way. It can
But,
diffuse.
but I realized I would do that as a pharmacist behind the counter, right?
Mm,
When I was counseling my patients, I said, "I know you must be really disappointed. Your sugar levels are up. The doctor's increased your medication. I know you might be really upset right now." So I talked to them, or I would say, "I know that you didn't plan to get this. I know that," and then tell them about their medicine and how great it is and how much they need to do that, and that they also need to cut down on their calories and try to walk, or whatever it was that I was trying to think. And then would ask my patients, do you understand? Can you repeat to me? And do you think that you could do this? Right? Um, because it was about their health. But if you show somebody that you really care about what you're doing, you're not just doing your job. And what I found was, not only was my success rate with my patients good, but I felt better.
mm,
I felt empowered that I was helping to them to get to better health. In As a parent, I'm helping my children to grow into to hopefully happy and not productive, but just people who feel valued in the community and who want to give back to the community. And as a legislator, I had all sorts of opportunities to engage and make sure that we had some good public policy. So I've been very blessed. And now, in the latter part of what I call my encore years, um, joining with Hope Andrade, another West Side Latina. And it's all about economic development and
mm,
bringing jobs to San Antonio, and then helping folks navigate that government or organizational bridge to and businesses. So we do consulting work and love the type of clients that we have. So um, I think the next decade's going to be even better.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I'm enjoying this conversation so much. You are just really giving the wisdom that I feel like we all need to be able to be successful and thrive as women in this world today. So what advice would you give young Latinas, Tejanas, Mexicanas who aspire to enter politics, especially in terms of embracing their cultural identity as and leveraging it like in their leadership position?
Well, first of all, anybody who wants to enter public service in an elected position, you better like people
Mm.
and you better be able to take criticism. But you can be a leader without being on a ballot. You can be an incredible leader in a nonprofit organization, in your schools, in your business organizations, in your neighborhoods, without having to be elected. Being elected is tough
Mm.
um, because the responsibility is to the people that elected you, right? To your constituents and the people who live in that area. And I would say if it's about you, if I always ask, I get a chance to meet with just so many great young people, and they say, I want to be a state rep. And I'll say, well, first thing I say, well, why would you like to be in elected office? And a lot of times they say, well, I think I'd be good at it. And I said, that's not the question I asked. I said, why do you want to be in elected office? You got to answer that question first.
Mm.
Because you'll be disappointed. Um,
Mm.
you'll be really disappointed. If it's about you and and power, no, no. Because at the end of the day, there is great reward as I get driving around San Antonio and I see the Children's Cancer Research Institute, and I said, man, that was a 3-day struggle all the time in that conference room. I'm so happy. Or I see a building at UTSA or the Health Science Center, or today at Texas A&M as we inaugurated our third president, um, a health program. When I see people using car seats and putting their babies in, knowing that Senator Zaffarini and I passed the first really strong car seat bills as a measure to save babies' lives.
Mm.
Um, when there's so many things that I see, and even now, I mean, when you think about the technology, there was a time when landlines, you only had to, that was your phone, and that cable was only about entertainment, and then you had your satellite. And I worked in a system that I wanted to redo and knew that technology, that there was a day that we would have more data and streaming and entertainment that we would voice lines. So I restructured the telecom bill, the telecom industry, and it was quite a challenge. But to make sure that if everybody was able to offer voice and data and entertainment and have a set of business codes that they would do that they could compete in, it would be better for the consumers. Same thing with insurance and same thing with so many other things. So I got to be involved in the creation of local workforce boards. Before that, it was all held in Austin, or um, ways that communities are able to build facilities, right? Like a convention center or a sporting venue or community sports fields. Um, so there were great things that I take pride in, that is that are milestones in our city, but that give people tools so that they can improve their own communities. But I was, I was always that kid that you better give Leticia more work, because if she's idle, she's going to be the problem child. So that same thing was in the legislature, is that, you better give me a system to overhaul or a major thing to work, because if not, yeah, I'm the trouble kid. So I was able to involve myself in so many of business reforms, school district reforms, transportation, workforce boards, of course, veterans. So in the 25 years, I saw so much. And I made great friendships and was so indebted to the people who were engaged. And I didn't care. I mean, for me, somebody who came and raged against something, at least they're involved. I don't mind people being pro or being con against something. What I despise is people who just don't give a bit. They think government doesn't affect them.
Mm.
They don't engage. They come home, they get off work, they watch TV. They do whatever. They're not involved in their community. They don't involved in their kids' school. They don't do nada. Oh no, it doesn't bother me. And when I meet people and they tell me government doesn't matter, and I said, really? And I said, well, let me ask you something. When you wake up in the morning, I said, do you like flip on a light? Yeah. And I said, well, that light and the electric grid and how much you pay for your electricity, that's all kind of government, right? That's government. And I said, do you go to the bathroom? Yeah. And I said, and you turn on the water faucet? I said, well, guess what? The quality of the water and is it safe and how much you pay for it? Guess what? That's government. And I said, and do you get in a car? Like you drive somewhere? Yes. Well, the roads and the laws about driving and your insurance and all, that's government. And I said, and what do you do? I said, if you're a beautician, a tattoo artist, a CPA, a nail technician, uh, do you have any state certification or licensure or anything? And they said, well, yeah, I do this. He goes, I got to keep my license up. And I said, and guess what? That's government. I said, so unless you're dead, and even when you're dead, the governance of how you get buried
Mhm.
and who gets, I said, that's government. I said, so when you say, government doesn't intrude in my life, unless you don't go to the bathroom, you don't turn on a light switch, you don't drink any water, you don't go to school, unless you sit there in the dark all day. But if you go outside and breathe, the air quality, that's government.
Yes, it is. Oh, I love how you have had your fingerprint on a lot of things that I was unaware dealt with government. I just think you have done such a great job making sure that representation um, was apparent in anything that you've done.
Yeah.
I have one last question for you.
Okay.
And it is, what legacy do you hope to leave both as the politician and as the daughter of a woman who significantly contributed to the preservation of mariachi music and culture?
Well, I'll take my mom first. I cry with joy every time I see a documentary and now on, University Mariachi and so much of the mariachi education. That was mom. That was the battles that she did and the music that she wrote and it still continues.
Mhm.
So I I have a great respect for the creative class, right? The people who are musicians and artists and poets and playwrights and writers and digital whizzes, right? That creative class, I didn't get that gene, but I have amazing respect for those folks in the creative class. They give us our humanity and they bring life, that emotion, and take the soft edge. No, I was a chemistry and math girl, right? I'm a pharmacist, and I know that the legacy that I want is just to make sure that when I'm not here, that my children will say and my grandchildren will say, I'm so proud that she was our mom and our abuela. And that there will be people who will be able to take advantage of something that I helped put in place so that they can be proud of themselves
Mm.
and of their family and the community. There's just not one thing. But I think that until I mean, with the traffic accident that I was involved in almost 2.5 years ago, I got a new lease on life
Mm.
and the ability, because it was almost taken away from me, and it took me 9 months to get back to my house.
Mm.
A great, great gratitude for our merciful Lord and wonderful healthcare professionals, but also that every day is a gift. every day. And be present, take time, love people, tell them you love them. And don't let the small stuff get in the way. Don't keep score. Oh, so and so do this. Oh, so and so do this. It
Mm.
ruins a family, it ruins an organization. It's not about keeping score, it's about all adding up to a top score. And I would say, live your life maybe every day, not as if it's your last, but with knowing that, I did okay today. I did okay for me, and I did okay for the ones that I love and the ones that I don't even know. I did okay.
It has been a privilege getting to talk to you, Senator. Thank you
Well,
so
thank you.
much for
Thank
joining
you. And thank you
the
for doing this. I appreciate it.
I really do appreciate you being a guest on our show. The Latina Leadership Podcast is very focused on making sure that representation is apparent and vital to making sure that everybody feels seen and validated.
Yes.
And the interview with you here today, this conversation has
Yeah.
just really ignited more passion.
Well, I am so glad, and I know that there are a lot of Latinas and folks that want to run for office to do stuff. Get involved in an organization first. Lead a community event, whether it's the fall church festival or an event for a not-for-profit. Do that. Make those networks. Make sure that you can do that before you even think about asking people for their vote.
Yes, thank you once again. This has been an episode of the Latina Leadership Podcast, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on the Latina Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your amigas, comadres, hermanas, your mom, your tias, or anyone who you think would enjoy the conversation. The Latina Leadership Podcast is a weekly video and audio podcast since 2020. Visit our online Latina Leaders Directory, join our growing community of Latina changemakers, keep up with our calendar of events, or reach out to us if you're interested in supporting the Latina Leadership Podcast by visiting our website at latinaleadershippodcast.com. And with that, we'll see you next time.